but I'm just going to get us started. So my name is Anise Montpleasure, and I'm the co-founder of Amplify Horse Racing. And Amplify Horse Racing is a platform for education and careers in the thoroughbred industry. So myself and my co-founder, Madison Scott, both had a similar intro to the thoroughbred industry in that we didn't come from a horse racing background. I'm from North Dakota, she's from Texas, and it tends to be sort of a roundabout journey in that, you find horse racing, you want to get involved, but it's kind of hard to know, especially if you don't live in an area where you're close to a racetrack or close to farms. And you guys are going to hear that reflected in the stories of a couple of our speakers tonight. So we founded Amplify to become a platform where people could learn what is the thoroughbred industry, how do I get involved, what are some educational programs that I can jump into, and maybe what are some careers that I can do. And so that brings me to these horse racing hangouts. So this is the fourth one that we've hosted so far, and the theme tonight is marketing and communications. These take place on a monthly basis, and each hangout has a different theme focused on a different sector of careers in the thoroughbred industry. So a lot of people, when they decide, whoa, I'm interested in horse racing, maybe I want to work in this, they think, okay, well, I can either be a jockey or a trainer or a veterinarian, which are all really cool careers, but there are so many other options out there. And so tonight we're going to talk about marketing, communications, and all of the different jobs that are part of that. And I think it's so cool because we have three very different speakers tonight who come from very different professions. And so you're going to get a really neat variety of information from the people here speaking to you. And just to give you guys a quick rundown of my background, that's actually how I got involved in the thoroughbred industry was through journalism. And so I got started at a very small track near my home, and somebody taught me how to conduct interviews with the jockeys and the trainers. And then I started Googling online for different internships. So I ended up doing a communications internship in Texas. I did a communications internship or a journalism internship at a racetrack called Canterbury Park in Minnesota. And then I applied for an internship called the Saratoga Special in Saratoga Springs, New York. So that was the first time that I ever made it to Saratoga, where I'm joining you from tonight. And so there I was working for a publication it's a seasonal publication that is printed every year. They cover racing here in Saratoga. And it was one of the coolest experiences, and it opened all of these other doors to me, to other internships and opportunities. And I'm actually now currently still working in the journalism sector of the industry. I write for a company called America's Best Racing, and I actually have a Spanish racing show that I co-host with Claudia Spadaro and Darwin Vizcaya, which is every Friday, called La Trifecta. And so that's one of the cool things that I found about journalism and communications is that you get to speak with and meet such a variety of people in the industry. You're constantly going up to trainers and owners and different industry professionals and introducing yourself, shaking your hand. And it's a great opportunity to meet people and hone your professional skills, all of those different things. And so even if you decide that, journalism isn't my thing, I still recommend it to people, and that, it's an excellent learning opportunity. So with that, I am going to introduce to you guys, let's see here, I'm going to mute. So for those of you who just popped in at the last second, if you could please remember to mute yourself and just keep your videos turned off, that would be great. And I'm going to jump over to introducing our first speaker. So Nadja Thompson is a recruiter and employee engagement specialist at the New York Racing Association. And Najja developed his passion for thoroughbred racing after being introduced to the sport by his uncle, a small-time breeder. After graduating from Florida State University, he followed his desire to work in the industry, joining NYRA in 2011. And he's held various roles at the New York Racing Association, including positions in the marketing department, and most recently was racing media and community relations specialist in the press office. And he also serves as vice president for the Turf Publicists of America. So I would like to present to you guys Nadja Thompson, who's definitely an expert in communications and marketing. And so, Najja, if you could just start by telling us, how did you learn about the thoroughbred industry? And then when you were deciding on a major in college, is that one of the things that you considered? Did you know that you wanted to have a career in the racing industry? And how did those kind of come together?
Thanks, Anise. First, thank you to you and Amplify for having us all here. It's a great forum. In terms of how I found out about the thoroughbred industry, I don't think I'm alone in that. First, you may get visiting to your local track through an uncle or a dad or a grandfather. And in my case, it was my uncle. And just as a fan, watching horses, betting horses. But it wasn't until college where you realize when you're starting to look for a career and you realize there's many facets. Somebody has to write the program. Somebody has to design the program, photography, mutuals, the internet, and we have online wagering now. So there's plenty of jobs in IT and management. So for myself, I was a history major and also marketing as well. And once I graduated, I worked in South Florida at Verizon. I wasn't really liking that role at all. And I would still go to Calder and Gulfstream on weekends. And then my uncle just stopped me one day and he said, why don't you try working in the industry? And, before when you're initially in the sport, you think it's as a jockey or as a trainer, and you think, I'm too tall for that. But as you go on and you know that there's different facets in the world of horse racing and many opportunities to break in. And so I wrote letters, and luckily I was thankful enough to get an opportunity through Julie Levine, our director of recruitment at NYRA. And I first joined NYRA in the marketing department, and then continuously there's always, once you make that first entryway into our industry, I think what's great is there are many opportunities that are abound. And I was able to work my way up from first assisting on the website to later writing for the website, and now helping to hire more people in the industry. And that's great.
That is so cool. And Julie is awesome. She's so great in what she does. And so I'm sure that you have a great time working with her now. But I think a lot of times when people think communications, at least in my experience, they think of journalism or writing. And so a lot of what you've done at NYRA when you're working in communications was, it's corporate communications. You're sending kind of the message for a larger agency. So explain a little bit about what your role entailed in that and how that would be different from mainstream journalism.
Definitely. It's more as a copywriter for the company, like helping to create a message that you want people to be involved. In my side was community relations. So getting local involvement from local towns and communities, high schools, and outreach. So I didn't necessarily have the background of journalism per se, but with my background in the marketing aspect of when I went to school, I was able to help cultivate these messages that we wanted to the public. And that's the great thing about racing is you can find your way to fit in. Just look at your background. There's a way that you can fit in different aspects. Looking at my resume, you wouldn't think communications necessarily, but I was able to massage my way into that role and able to bloom.
And so that's actually something I meant to make a note of earlier, and that a lot of people think that they might have to go to school to study equine to be involved in the thoroughbred industry. And I also didn't study anything equine related. I also majored in communications and international studies and also Spanish. And so it's like, and I think that shows with your career as well. And with mine, it's like, you can study applied areas and still have an opportunity to come into the industry. And, maybe it even adds a different perspective. Was there anything in college that you learned from what you studied that, you felt gave a different perspective to your work in horse racing?
Definitely the marketing aspect and reaching out. When I first joined NYRA, we weren't really doing much with the website. Of course, it was 2011, so websites weren't as accessible as they are today, or streaming of online races. and you saw other sport industries doing that as well. So I was able to team with people here at NYRA and kind of present that push of how we should be streaming our races, making it more accessible for people, growing out our YouTube channel. So as you said, like different skills and different skill sets come to use when you join and have a passion for horse racing. You can find your niche and different ways to contribute.
And so, you know, now you're working more on the recruitment and employee engagement side of things. And so how do you guys find people, or who comes to you for jobs? And then, you know, for maybe some of the people who are on this call who have an interest in finding a career, do you have any, you know, resume building tips or suggestions for some of them for finding a position?
Certainly. Our careers at NYRA and other racetracks, I know there are career sections on the track website. Ours, NYRA.com. You scroll to the bottom, you can see the career section. As far as resume, always be sure to list your skill sets and varying skills, because a lot of people may not think you're applicable to many different roles at the track, but in actuality, you may very well be. For instance, you may have a communications and journalism major and foreground, but in the background, if you have IT skills, that could help on website, or if you have math skills, analytical skills, that could help in the mutuals department. So don't sell yourself short on your resume. Include all your skills and experiences, and we take it into account, especially working out here in New York City, where we see many different types of people, world resumes. We're always looking for Spanish speakers, French, Japanese. The game is very global and international, and we need all the help. So always remember to list all your skills and skill sets and how you can apply them.
No, that's excellent advice. And no, I think that is amazing. And for those who are here looking for that kind of career advice, guys, I hope that everybody is taking notes. So thank you so much, Naj. I really appreciate it. And with that, we are going to move over to Autry. And so Audrey Graham is a native of Versailles, Kentucky. Yeah. And she graduated from the University of Kentucky with a degree in equine science and management. So now you guys are going to get a different perspective, somebody who did actually study equine. And she started as an intern at TaylorMade Sales Agency, was promoted to head photographer and assistant experience director. And then she came to work for Spendthrift Farm in October of 2017, where she currently is at as the assistant marketing director. And she loves the opportunity to take photos of world-class horses. You guys should all definitely follow her on Instagram because her photography is gorgeous, or just go ahead and follow Spendthrift Farm on Instagram. And she's also the co-host of a horse racing podcast called Riders Up.
Yep.
So welcome, Autry. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And so this is something you and I have discussed before, in that you came from, you know, a complete non-industry background. You grew up in Versailles, Kentucky, which is like the heart of horse country, but you still had no idea of how to get in. So what piqued your interest, and then how did you decide to go on and study equine science?
I mean, honestly, I didn't grow up in the industry at all. We would skip school to go to Keeneland, and from there, I mean, in college, I studied science and realized I probably should have a purpose. I can't just do science. And so my credits transferred best, honestly, to the equine program. I wanted to do beef. I had no experience in horses, but they said, if you want to graduate in 4 years, you're going to have to do equine. So I was like, all right, here we go. Don't even know how to saddle a horse, but I will do this. And so I actually transferred to UK my junior year. So I didn't even start in the horse industry until I was a junior. And even then, saying start in the horse industry is a very loose term. I was in, you know, Tools and Tack 101 because I was the kid that knew nothing. And I realized pretty quickly that I enjoyed the lifestyle. I did not have the knowledge, I did not have the experience, but the lifestyle of horse racing was really interesting. My first internship was actually in the sport horse world, and I realized I did not like that in about 1 minute. I was in marketing at Haggard. We had to be assigned an internship, and
so explain what Haggard is.
Oh, Haggard is a huge vet clinic, for equine vet clinic here in Lexington, and it services all types of sport horses. So it doesn't have to be thoroughbreds. They do Anything from standardbreds to hunters, anything, any sport, they handle it, do surgeries and all that. And my job was basically to go to horse shows that they sponsored and hand out gift packages. And I loved being outside and doing these things, but I did not care about the sport in a way that felt like it was a passion. And then when that internship ended, I actually didn't have a job, didn't know what I was doing, was like, I don't know the plan here. And so I met the owner of another farm at a Miranda Lambert concert at Rupp Arena. I just happened to be sitting next to them. They were drunk and offered me a job. So I was like, great, I'm going to need you to write that down so you don't forget that you just offered me this. And I showed up on Monday and they were like, oh, you're the girl. I'm like, I am. I'm ready to start my job today. So that was TaylorMade, and I was the assistant photographer, whatever that means. My job was to follow around the photographer and just learn what was going on. And one day my boss went to Mexico for a trip and said, here's the camera. It's the February sale at Fasig-Tipton, which is a thoroughbred auction house. And the February sale is breeding stock style horses. And she said, I'm going to need you to take photos and I'm going to be out of the country. So you're just going to figure it out. And I Googled, or I watched a YouTube video about how to turn the video or the camera on at Fasig-Tipton. And from there I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And just kept growing my skill. I realized if I didn't know anything, if I could at least take pictures of horses, that is something that is tangible that I could do, even if I couldn't talk the lingo or do anything. So that kind of started me just being in that marketing side, just figuring out if I could nail taking photos of horses for commercial purposes, at least that's something I could take with me to keep going. So, yeah.
And you have such a beautiful creative eye. Is that something that you felt like you developed based on, you know, this position that you were kind of just thrust into? Or is that something that, you know, as you got more involved in the thoroughbred industry, you knew you wanted to apply somehow?
I had no idea that I was creative until I got this job. I had never, I mean, I knew that I always studied weird. I would draw pictures to study, but I just thought that other people did that. I didn't realize that that was like a skill. And once I started taking pictures, I started realizing, oh, wow, these are kind of good. And I kind of know what I'm looking at. And then I realized that it was a way to not be in the office, you know, and be able to be outside and go meet people and make connections and do different things, be at the sales, be at the racetrack, go to people's farms. And I was like, whatever is going on with this photo thing is working. And I just started, you know, working really hard to get better, but it's not something that I knew I always had. I mean, I barely even knew how to turn the camera on my first day. So something I've definitely developed over time by studying other photographers like Alex Evers, for example, racetrack photographer. I took one of his courses and, you know, you'll see one of his photos and I'll try to replicate it on my own to figure out how the heck he took it. And you just do that over and over again until you get better, really.
And I have to add that, you know, we talked a lot about Autry's photography, but she, you know, that has merged into other things as well. She's very involved in the horse country tours given at Spendthrift Farm. So we actually had Ann Hardy from Horse Country on one of our last episodes. But for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Horse Country is a kind of an educational tour initiative around the central Kentucky area to bring people into these thoroughbred farms and, you know, teach them about what goes on behind the scenes of the industry. And also the podcast. I'd love for you to talk a bit about that. But, you know, how has you coming from outside of the industry helped giving those horse country tours? Because, you know, you kind of have a perspective of what kinds of questions a beginner would be asking.
Yeah, I think I am very lucky that to be in a role where my job is explaining to people what's happening, whether it's through social media or tourism, whatever it may be. I'm lucky that I don't have that horse background because I've learned, you know, just going on tours myself, people will say things and I don't even know the words that they're using. You know, they might say, and this is very simple, but there's people from all different backgrounds come on tours. They might say, okay, these are all of our stallions. And people will say, well, are they thoroughbreds? You know, they ask really simple questions like that. And not coming from a horse background, I feel like I'm able to, number one, explain to people by answering questions that I know they're going to answer or ask before they ask them. So instead of saying simple things like, welcome to our stallion complex, you know, this horse won this race, this, and this, you know, you tell more of a story like, welcome to our stallion complex. These are all of our big thoroughbred race boys. You know, you can kind of learn to twist your words to explain to people what's going on without them feeling like they need to ask really simple questions. And I think it's given me an interesting perspective because I can actually ask questions that other people would have because I've been in their position before. And I think that helps with kind of our branding with Spendthrift too, with, you know, our social media. It tries to be very open, answer questions, ask people questions. Have you ever wondered about this? Did you know? Things like that. So I think that's helped a lot. And then with that, you said something about our podcast. Our podcast kind of came from that same concept. It's what do people want to know that they're not getting right now? So our podcast is Riders Up. It's on Apple and Spotify. And it's just behind the scenes stories of horse racing. You know, usually you only get the stories Derby Day, you know, on the NBC coverage. You don't really get the stories otherwise. And so we try to find big players in the game, like Alex Evers, who I mentioned earlier, is a great track photographer, Jose Ortiz, or Josh Stevens, who's a great up-and-coming bloodstock agent who's had a lot of success with Mr. Money and By My Standards, have been great racehorses. So we try to get people from all over the board. Tom Law from the Saratoga Special, he was on there. People from all different backgrounds and tell their stories. And I feel like in the podcast, Shayna, my co-host, and I both don't come from a horse racing background. So we ask a lot of questions that an industry insider may not think to ask because they've had all of these experiences. So maybe simple things like, let me think. When we were talking to Jose Ortiz, you know, how do you get ready for the day as a jockey? Down to like, what time do you wake up? What does your morning routine look like? You know, how many races a day do you ride? How physically taxing is that? Is that an average day? What does Derby Day look like? What time do you wake up? Do you eat breakfast? Do you ever get lunch? It's like you're on a horse every 5 minutes, you know, things like that. So it's definitely opened up a platform of education through different avenues than your standard, here's a website with a list of terms, you know, that kind of thing. We found a way to educate people and give them really neat stories they can take home with them in a different way.
So if you were to take one piece of advice to give someone who, you know, to give Autry 6 years ago or whatever, as you were starting to get into this 5 years ago, to kind of aid you in this learning curve of getting into the thoroughbred industry, what would that piece of advice be?
I think I would tell myself to not put so much pressure on feeling like you have to know everything that's going on about everything. I think instead I would tell myself to pick one part of the industry that I'm interested in or that I like or that is presented to me, like sales, and just learn about the sales. You don't have to know sales and handicapping and 2-year-old and training, like maybe just pick yearling sales. You don't need to know the workout patterns for a horse initially. Just pick one thing and get to know that really well. And then naturally all these other things will start to fall in over time versus stressing yourself out, being like, wow, I have a million things I have to learn. I have to learn it right now. And I was really bad for that for a while. But instead, just picking that one thing and getting really good at that, and then things will fall into place from there. So.
Mike was off there. Okay. I don't mean to put Najja on the spot and throw it right back to you, but I wish I would have asked you the same question. And before we head back over to Andrea, you know, I'd like to know the same thing. What would be your best piece of advice for a young person or anybody who's a newcomer to all of this trying to get in to aid in that learning process?
I would say to definitely reach out to people at the track, go to track websites, check job boards. These jobs are posted on national boards from Craigslist to Indeed, overall on the track websites themselves, and just try to make a connection. And don't be afraid to start what you may believe is beneath you or at a low stance. I know many people that have just started working at the track, handing out racing publications, who have now grown to vice president and higher positions. I know for myself, initially when Julie called me back, I didn't know at the time, but she had me confused with somebody else. And she said, oh, so you're going to work in help delivering programs. And I thought to myself, well, if this is how it starts, this is how it starts. But definitely try to make a connection. Go, of course, visiting to racetracks, trying to find anybody through email. Twitter is a great resource, especially in horse racing. A lot of people are there, including myself, and we're always looking to add great people to the industry.
Yeah, Twitter is a great recommendation. And one thing that I've found is that, you know, a lot of racing people we have this little bubble on Twitter. It's like the horse racing Twitter sphere. And it's a lot of horse racing insiders, but you don't seem to get a lot of people on the fringes interacting with that. So, you know, if you're on Twitter, you know, search out these people, follow Autry, follow Spendthrift Farm, follow NYRA, follow Najja, you know, start to follow these people. And that's a great way of starting to build your network. So thank you so much for that. And, you know, now we're going to throw it over to our international traveler of the bunch. So I'd like to introduce you all to Andrea Brancini, who is a philosophy university graduate. So you can really come from any background. And he's been an active participant in the horse racing business since 1984. He's worked in international equine shipping in Italy, France, Ireland, England, and since 2003 in the United States for a company called Mersant International. And while he was in England, he managed a new market-based racing venture for Italian owners and had a lot of success with that. And he's also written for a variety of industry publications, including the Racing Post, Pacemaker Update, Underwood Review, and he also keeps a regular column on horses' names, a very clever column, I might add. It's a very fascinating, in the Thoroughbred Daily News. And he's also a very passionate supporter of, you know, illuminating the young about this complex world of horse racing. He's been an excellent Amplify volunteer in the past. He's held different horse racing educational events. And so we're so thrilled to welcome you, Andrea, to this horse racing hangout. And, you know, one thing I want to note before he gets started is that I think Andrea's career really illuminates the fact that, you know, you can have your hands in a little bit of everything. Like, you know, you can still be a writer and have a main career in another sector of the industry. But, you know, just starting at the beginning, you know, you have a really interesting educational background. How did that segue into the thoroughbred industry? How did you learn about the thoroughbred industry to start?
I have a little bit of a connection in my family to horse racing, but not thoroughbred racing, standardbred racing. But I didn't want to have anything to do with that, even if that had been the great passion of my father and my grandfather. I had my own ideas. Only when I was almost 30, I saw the possibility of a job in Paris, France, and I worked in a company that is similar to the one I work now, that did Blastock and shipping, buying horses, the sales, etc. Why did I embrace horse racing, which was not vocational to me? Because I liked enormously some aspects of it, like it's international. You meet a lot of different people. You meet grooms, you meet the owners, and all the people in between. So there is variety, okay? If you do other jobs, you will see that variety. I mean, some jobs have it, some jobs don't. Horse racing has a lot of variety, and also has variety on an international scale. I find that attractive. I also found that even if I didn't have a heavy background of horse racing, I hadn't worked in a farm or with a trainer when I was 18, 19. I thought I could make it work for me, for my employers. For instance, I mean, this was, I graduated in 1979 and I started work in 1984. There were no computers, no phone. Computers were, you know, at the pioneering stage. And I had also, on top of my philosophy degree, I had a computer programming certificate. So I started to do little programs in BASIC for people in my company to do database of mares. So I don't want to bore you with my quote-unquote career, but to have general skills does help in horse racing. When I started, the ability to write a letter is a plus, okay? Another big plus, I say it not because, but foreign languages. Foreign languages will help you a great deal. For instance, I don't speak Spanish, but I'm sure that if I spoke fluent Spanish, it would help me a lot in all aspects in navigating a farm or a race course, etc. My French is very rudimentary, but I can have a conversation. It has helped me enormously in my shipping job because I get French grooms who don't speak English, and they all want to talk to me. Immediately I become very popular. Often at the Breeders' Cup, I find French grooms who ship with other people, with my competitors. They want to come and talk to me because I speak French. And so to the young people who follow this initiative, keep this in mind. Every skill you may have, computer, language, literary skill, like you seem to be all journalists or aspiring journalists, to be able to write is a great plus, because even commercially, there are many times where you have to write a letter, you have to write an email, you have to write an email that is clear, and so on. One other thing about what to tell young people is horse racing maybe it's trivial, but it's very complicated. It is a sport with an industry attached to it. So there are a lot of things to learn. It's not that easy to understand. And I welcome what Audrey said, you better approach it strong on one side, because there's so much to learn that you cannot learn everything in one day. At the same time, I think in horse racing, this is an old proverb I've learned in England, you have to pay your dues. So to pay your dues, you have to give the time and give the effort, but time is important too. And also you have to learn. When I was in England, I tried to read a lot of books about horse racing, even in the 40s and in the 50s, because I think I needed that, to speak a common language, to have a background of information. And again, I say, horse racing has existed for a long, long time. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of information. You have to approach that mountain of information. I agree with Autry, do it at your pace. You cannot learn everything in a week, but you have to pay your dues, quote unquote, from that point of view. The last thing I want to say, because I don't want to take too much time, is manners, personal manners. I think they're very important. You talk about talking with the jockeys, talking with the owners, talking with the grooms. It does help to have, I don't know, some sort of way of dealing with people, with patience, respect, but generally good manners. I find this helps me a lot in my job too. You were talking. One other thing I would like to say to the people is there's a lot of jobs in horse racing, a lot of different jobs. I want to, of course, vets, blacksmiths, feed merchant. In transportation, there are a lot of different jobs, from the flying groom who flies on planes to other countries, horse track companies, shipping company, drivers, specific to racing, identifiers, Blastock agents are the middleman who buys horses for an owner, etc. The Blastock agents have assistants, pedigree expert. I'm not a great believer in pedigrees, but there's some people who make a living from being pedigree expert. It's an art, okay? So there are people who make a living, so they shut me up. Racing managers, people who assist with a stable. Sales consignor is a bit of a seasonal job. They employ a lot of people. Farms, in farms there are not only the grooms, but there is the middle staff, people in the office. Racetracks, Najja, they are employers of people in every capacity: administration, stewards, valet, clockers, maintenance crew, etc. Sales company, again, they employ a lot of people with education, etc. I think a race track is a great employer of people. You have jockeys, jockeys agent, jockey club, which is administration, racing journalist and publicist, chiropractor, masseur. The USDA is a great employer of people who work with animals. So the scope is very big. I want to say one last thing. The last hangout featured 3 female jockeys. I was very impressed with the level of education and also bookish approach to horse racing that they had. Julie Cron said that she really, in her work, learned how to ride by reading the autobiography of Steve Coulson. And of course, Fern, the other jockey you interviewed, phenomenally well-round person. And so this is what I would say to a young person: it's a complicated sport, and the businesses, there are a lot of service jobs. Find, like in the case of Autry, what makes you tick, and give it your best shot.
And I think, you covered some amazing points in that, a great takeaway is that it is such an international industry. So it's like, once you guys get into the thoroughbred industry, you don't just have opportunities within one state or one country. You have opportunities to travel to Australia or Japan or France or Ireland or England, so many different places. And I think a really great point you made, and that a lot of people forget, there are many people who come to the horse racing industry because they love the animal. I think, we all love the animal. We're so drawn to the beauty of the horses, of horse racing, but the animals are the easy part. It's the people that can be the trickier part. So if you can develop those technical skills, the people skills, the interactions with, the human interaction side of things, it really opens up this huge variety of opportunities, regardless of what sector of the industry you decide to work in. So I think those are some amazing points. And so with that, I just wanted to thank all of our speakers tonight. I want to thank everyone who tuned in. Autry, Najja, Andrea, you were all wonderful. Thank you so much for everyone who took this hour of tonight to learn more about careers and education in the thoroughbred industry. You guys can expect to get from me a survey about tonight. I would really appreciate your feedback, because I'm always seeking to improve these hangouts. And on that note as well, this has been recorded and will be available on the Amplify Horse Racing YouTube page if you want to go back and watch any parts of it. I welcome you to reach out at any time to info@amplifyhorseracing.org with your questions. Follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And our next Amplify Hangout is on September 15th, and that's going to be about careers with benevolence. So talking about, all the opportunities to work with different charities and put up benevolent organizations in the thoroughbred industry. And you can register for all of the Hangouts of 2020 all at once on the registration page on our website, amplifyhorseracing.org. So again, thank you all so much for being with us tonight. Hopefully see you soon, and thank you for participating.